Senate Armed Services Committee meets today to receive testimony on the U.S. policy in the Asia-Pacific region. I want to thank our distinguished witnesses for appearing before us today and for your continued service to the nation. America's national interests in the Asia-Pacific region are deep and enduring. We seek to maintain a balance of power that fosters the peaceful expansion of free societies, free trade, free markets, and free commons, air, sea, space, and cyber. These are values that we share with increasing numbers of Asia's citizens, and for 7 decades, administrations of both parties have worked with our friends and allies in the region to uphold this rules-based order and to enlist new partners in this shared effort, an effort that now extends to states like Indonesia and Vietnam. No country has benefited more from a peaceful regional order in the Asia-Pacific region than China. I'm betraying my advanced age when I say that I still remember being in the Great Hall of the People on the occasion of the normalization between our countries. Since then, China's social and economic development has been remarkable, and it has added to the prosperity of the world. Unfortunately, we increasingly see a pattern of behavior from China that suggests that some of our highest hopes for our relationship are not materializing, and that call into question for nations across the Pacific whether China's rise will in fact be peaceful. Indeed, many of these troubling activities have only increased under the leadership of the new president, who will arrive here next week for a state visit. China's military modernization continues with its emphasis on advanced systems that appear designed to project power, counter U.S. military capabilities, and deny the United States the ability to access and operate in the Western Pacific. At the same time, cyber attacks against the United States are growing in scope, scale, and frequency. Billions of dollars worth of intellectual property, including sensitive defense information, have been stolen. And many of these attacks, especially the recent breach at the Office of Personnel Management, are believed by everyone to have originated in China, despite the administration's unwillingness to say so. These growing threats are compounded by China's assertion of vast territorial claims in the East and South China Seas, which are inconsistent with international law. In 2013, Beijing proclaimed an air defense identification zone over large portions of the East China Sea, including over territory claimed by Japan and South Korea. More recently, China has reclaimed nearly 3,000 acres of land in the South China Sea, more than all other claimants combined, and at an unprecedented pace. Last month, China's foreign minister said it had halted these activities, but recently released satellite images show clearly that this is not true. What's more, China is rapidly militarizing this reclaimed land, building garrisons, harbors, intelligence, and surveillance infrastructure, and at least 3 airstrips that could support military aircraft. With the addition of surface-to-air missiles and radars, these new land features could enable China to declare and enforce an air defense identification zone in the South China Sea and to hold that vital region at risk. China is incrementally and unilaterally changing the status quo through coercion, intimidation, even force. Its goal appears clear: the assertion of sovereignty over the South China Sea, a key economic artery through which approximately $5 trillion in shipborne trade passes every year. As one Chinese admiral recently told a conference in China about the South China Sea, quote, "It belongs to China." The United States has rightly rejected this view. As Secretary of Defense Ash Carter said in May, turning an underwater rock into an airfield simply does not afford the rights of sovereignty or permit restrictions on international air or maritime transit. Secretary Carter vowed that the United States will fly, sail, and operate wherever international law allows, as U.S. forces do all over the world. Unfortunately, it's been 4 months since that speech, but the administration has continued to restrict our Navy ships from operating within 12 nautical miles of China's reclaimed islands. This is a dangerous mistake that grants de facto recognition of China's man-made sovereignty claims. And these restrictions have continued even after China sent its own naval vessels within 12 nautical miles of the Aleutian Islands, as President Obama concluded his recent visit to Alaska. After that incident, U.S. officials emphasized that the Chinese ships did not violate international law, which allows countries to transit other nations' territorial seas under what is called innocent passage. That is true, but we've not been asserting our rights just as forcefully. We must uphold the principle of freedom of the seas for commercial and military purposes on, under, and below the water. The best sign of that commitment would be to conduct freedom of navigation operations within 12 nautical miles of China's reclaimed islands in the South China Sea. More broadly, the United States must continue to sustain a favorable military balance in the Asia-Pacific region. We must remain clear-eyed about the implications of China's rapid military modernization. We must take advantage of new and emerging technologies to preserve our ability to project power over long distances and operate in contested environments. We must invest in enhancing the resilience of our forward-deployed forces, and we must continue to help our allies and partners in the Asia-Pacific region to build their maritime capacity, an initiative that this committee seeks to further in the fiscal year 2016 National Defense Authorization Act. None of this will be possible, however, if we continue to live with a mindless sequestration and a broken acquisition system. All of us want to ensure that we avoid miscalculation, but we only encourage miscalculation when there is a gap between our words and our actions, and it is that gap that China has exploited to assert vast territorial claims, bully its neighbors, destabilize the region, and challenge the freedom of the seas. Ultimately, we need to think anew about deterrence. When it comes to China's destabilizing activities, it is not that the United States is doing nothing. It is that nothing we're doing has been sufficient to deter China from continuing activities that the United States and our allies and partners say are unacceptable. The cyber attacks, the economic espionage and theft, the land reclamation, the coercion of its neighbors, and the assertion and attempted enforcement of vast unlawful territorial claims. We need to develop options and act on them to deter these admittedly unconventional threats, or else they will continue and grow. And they will do so at the expense of the national security interests of the United States, the peace and stability of the Asia-Pacific region, and a rules-based international order. With that, I look forward to the testimony of our witnesses today. Senator Reid.
Oh, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Let me first thank you for calling this important hearing on a maritime security in the Asia-Pacific region, and also thank the witnesses for appearing today. Thank you, gentlemen, for your service to the nation, to the Navy. Thank you both. When Senator McCain and I were in Vietnam, we heard concern from almost every single government official about the heightened tension in the South China Sea caused by China's activities. And Vietnam is not alone in this regard. For the last 2 years, China has undertaken extraordinary and unprecedented reclamation activities on disputed land features in the South China Sea that have alarmed all of the countries in the region, most of which would prefer to resolve these territorial disputes through legal means under the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. These activities appear to have just been the beginning, as China has now turned to militarizing these features by building airstrips and surveillance towers that I believe will further destabilize the region. While there has been some progress on the bilateral strategy to decrease tension between the U.S. Navy and the Chinese Navy through the establishment of new risk reduction mechanisms such as engagement rules for air and maritime safety, our efforts to date do not seem to have had an impact on China's aggressive tactics in the South China Sea. I would like to hear from the witness what the Department believes is the best way forward to address this activity, and whether current efforts are sufficient to de-escalate tension and convince the Chinese government to pursue legal and diplomatic solutions to its territorial disputes with its neighbors. I am also quite concerned with North Korea's recent rhetoric that it is improving its nuclear arsenal in, quote, quality and quantity, further contributing to the heightened tensions in the region. Admiral Harris, I'd especially like to get your assessment and update on the threat posed by the North Koreans and how we are addressing it. And with that, gentlemen, I look forward to your testimony.
I welcome the witnesses. Secretary Shear, it's nice to see you again, and thank you for your continued outstanding service, including as our ambassador to Vietnam. And Admiral Harris, I know that you are relatively new in your job, and we thank you for the great job you're doing, and we look forward to your testimony. Begin with you, Mr. Secretary.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ranking Member Reed, and all the members of the committee for inviting me to join you today. I'm particularly pleased to be here discussing the Defense Department's maritime security strategy for the Asia-Pacific region, and to be alongside our very capable U.S. Pacific Commander, Admiral Harry Harris. Last month, the Department of Defense released a report detailing its Asia-Pacific maritime security strategy, which reflects both the enduring interest the United States has in the Asia-Pacific and the premium we place on maritime peace and security in this critical part of the world. This strategy is one element of the U.S. government's larger, comprehensive strategy to uphold maritime security in the Asia-Pacific region and protect America's principled interests in international law, freedom of navigation, unimpeded lawful commerce, and peaceful resolution of disputes. For 70 years, U.S. military presence in the Asia-Pacific has played an indispensable role in undergirding regional peace, stability, and security, and will continue to protect these interests in the future. There are, as you know, growing challenges in maritime Asia, trends and behaviors that we detailed in the strategy report. Regional military modernization has increased significantly the potential for dangerous miscalculations or conflict in the maritime domain. Strong nationalist sentiments inflame passions over territorial disputes and discourage good faith negotiations to resolve them. Competition abounds over significant but finite natural resources. And in the South China Sea, China has almost completed large-scale efforts to reclaim land and construct artificial islands on disputed features in the Spratly Islands. While land reclamation is not new, and China is not the only claimant to have conducted reclamation, as the chart to my right shows, China's recent activities far outweigh other efforts in size, pace, and effort. We're concerned about China's long-term intentions for these features and the potential for further militarization of the South China Sea. As we've stated clearly to the Chinese, these actions are not only unilaterally altering the status quo, they're also complicating the lowering of tensions and the peaceful resolution of disputes. But let me be clear. The Defense Department is not standing still in the face of these challenges. We're systematically implementing a long-term strategy aimed at preserving U.S. interests in the military access, building the capability of our allies and partners, and preserving the stability of the Asia-Pacific domain. The Department's strategy comprises 4 lines of effort. First, we're strengthening our military capacity to ensure the United States can successfully deter conflict and coercion and respond decisively when needed. DoD is investing in new cutting-edge capabilities, deploying our finest maritime capabilities forward, and distributing these capabilities more widely across the region. Second, we're working together with our allies and partners from Northeast Asia to the Indian Ocean to build their maritime capacity. We're building greater interoperability and developing more integrated operations with our allies and partners. We are also expanding our regional exercise program with a particular focus on developing new multilateral exercises and expanding training with Southeast Asian partners. The Defense Department is also implementing a new Southeast Asia maritime security initiative. This effort will increase training and exercises, personnel support, and maritime domain awareness capabilities for our partners in Southeast Asia. On that note, I'd like to express our thanks and appreciation to the members of this committee for their work to include a South China Sea-focused maritime capacity building authority in their draft of the FY16 NDAA. I can't emphasize enough how important maritime capacity building is to our overarching strategy. Third, we're levering defense diplomacy and building greater transparency. We are trying to reduce the risk of miscalculation or conflict and promoting shared maritime rules of the road. The Department is actively seeking to mitigate risk in maritime Asia, both through bilateral efforts with China as well as region-wide risk reduction measures. These and other elements of U.S.-China defense diplomacy have yielded some positive results. U.S. and PLA Navy vessels have now successfully employed the code for unplanned encounters at sea on multiple occasions during recent interactions. I would note that while the United States operates consistent with the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, we've seen positive momentum in promoting shared rules of the road. Our efforts, and we have seen positive momentum in promoting shared rules of the road. Our efforts would be greatly strengthened by Senate ratification of UNCLOS. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to thank you and other members for your support on this issue. Finally, we're working to strengthen regional security institutions and encourage the development of an open and effective regional security architecture. ASEAN is an increasingly important DoD partner in the department, and the department is enhancing its engagement in ASEAN-based institutions. This includes efforts such as our decision to host ASEAN defense ministers for the 2014 U.S.-ASEAN Defense Forum, as well as Secretary Carter's recent announcement of DoD's commitment to deploy a technical advisor in support of ASEAN's maritime security efforts. Throughout its history, the U.S. has relied upon and advocated for freedom of the seas. This freedom is essential to our economic and security interests, and nowhere more so than in the Asia-Pacific. The Department is constantly working to evaluate the strategic environment and to ensure we have the necessary strategy, resources, and tool to meet the challenges we face. We're clear-eyed about the growing complexity of this task, yet we're making progress that over the long term will be significant in shaping the regional security environment. We're making calculated and careful investments. We're gaining unprecedented access in the region. Our relationships and interoperability with allies and partners are stronger than ever before. Moreover, partners across the region are enhancing their defense cooperation with each other in unprecedented ways. In short, we're deeply committed to the maritime security of the Asia-Pacific region. We don't discount the extent of the challenges, but we're undertaking a comprehensive effort to ensure that maritime Asia remains open, free, and secure in the decades ahead. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Admiral Harris.
Chairman McCain, Senator Reid, and distinguished members, it's my honor to appear once again before this committee. I'm pleased to be here with Assistant Secretary Shear to discuss the Asia-Pacific maritime security strategies. The United States is a maritime nation, and the importance of the Asia-Pacific region to our nation's security and prosperity cannot be overstated. Almost 30% of the world's maritime trade, as the Chairman said, over $5 trillion, transits the South China Sea annually. This includes $1.2 trillion in shipborne trade bound for the United States. The Asia-Pacific region is critical for our nation's economic future. For decades, this region has remained free from major conflicts, allowing the United States and other Pacific nations, including China, to enjoy the benefits of its vast maritime spaces. However, the security environment is changing, potentially placing this stability at risk. Rapid economic and military modernization and a growing demand for resources have increased the potential for conflict. Peacetime freedom of navigation is under pressure. If not handled properly, territorial and maritime disputes in the East and South China Seas could disrupt stability throughout the region. Claimants to disputed areas routinely use maritime law enforcement and Coast Guard vessels to enforce their claims while nominally keeping these issues out of the military sphere. While no country appears to desire military conflict, tactical miscalculations can lead to strategic consequences. The United States does not take sides on issues of sovereignty with respect to these territorial disputes, but we do insist that all maritime claims be derived from naturally formed land features in accordance with customary international law as reflected in the Law of the Sea Convention. The United States also emphasizes the importance of peacefully resolving maritime and territorial disagreements in accordance with international law, and we oppose the use of intimidation, coercion, or aggression. The U.S. believes every nation, large or small, should have the opportunity to develop and prosper in line with international laws and standards. If one country selectively ignores these rules for its own benefit, others will undoubtedly follow, eroding the international legal system and destabilizing regional security and the prosperity of all Pacific states. Part of PACOM's role in the Asia-Pacific maritime strategy will be ensuring all nations have continued access to the maritime spaces vital to the global economy. International recognition and protection of freedom of navigation is vital to the world's economy and our way of life. To safeguard the freedom of the seas, PACOM routinely exercises with allies and partners, executes freedom of navigation operations, and maintains a robust presence throughout the region. These activities help build partner capacity to contribute to the region's stability, enhance relationships, improve understanding of shared challenges, and message the U.S.'s resolve. The Asia-Pacific Maritime Security Strategy outlines our plan to safeguard freedom of the seas, deter conflict, and promote adherence to international laws and standards. It reaffirms our commitment to the principles found in UNCLOS, and in accordance with this strategy and in pursuit of these goals, Pacific Command's forces fly, sail, and operate wherever international law allows, while continuing to strengthen the relationships and rule of law that enable the peaceful rise of every nation in the region. A fundamental factor in the feasibility of this new strategy has been the rebalance to the Pacific. The rebalance, initiated almost 4 years ago by President Obama, set the conditions for the implementation of this strategy. The rebalance strengthened treaty alliances and partnerships, increased partner capacities and cooperation, improved interoperability, and increased security capabilities in the region. DoD's new maritime strategy capitalizes on the momentum of the rebalance and continues with its initiatives. In executing the new maritime strategy, PACOM will continue to employ the most advanced and capable platforms as they are deployed or assigned to the Pacific. Use the forward presence of military forces to engage allies and partners to deter aggression. Reinforce internationally accepted rules and norms, including the concepts of freedom of navigation and innocent passage. Train and exercise with allies and partners to increase interoperability and build trust. Implement risk reduction mechanisms such as a code for unplanned encounters at sea and the U.S.-China confidence building measures to help prevent accidents and tactical miscalculations. And continue deepening alliances and partnerships through strategic efforts in places like Japan, Korea, Australia, Thailand, and the Philippines, while building new and deeper military relationships in places like Singapore, India, Vietnam, and other like-minded friends and partners. Thank you for your continued support to U.S. PACOM and our men and women in uniform and their families who live and work in the vast Asia-Pacific region. And I look forward to answering your questions.
Well, thank you, Admiral. Maybe I could begin with this news report out of Defense One, defiant Chinese admiral's message, South China Sea, quote, belongs to China. There was a gathering, I think, in London, and there was Chinese and American and Japanese, as well as other military leaders, and the admiral who commands the North Sea Fleet for the People's Liberation Army and Navy. South China Sea, as the name indicated, is a sea area. It belongs to China. What's our response to that, Mr. Secretary?
Thank you, Senator. Chinese have said that before. It was nothing new for the Admiral to have said that. If he was referring to the area of the South China Sea demarcated by the so-called 9-dash line, it's clear to us that that 9-dash line is not consistent with international law, and we don't recognize the Chinese claim to the area encompassed by the 9-dash line. With regard to our operations in that area, every time we sail and we fly and we operate within that area on a daily basis, and every time we do so.
You operate within that area, but you haven't operated within 12 miles of these reclaimed features, have you?
We have conducted freedom of navigation operations.
Have we gone within the 12 miles of the reclaimed area?
We've gone within 12 miles.
The answer, I believe, is no.
We have not recently gone within 12 miles of a reclaimed area. However,
when was the last time we did?
I believe the last time we conducted a freedom of navigation operation in the South China Sea was April of this year.
Within the 12-mile limit. Come on, Mr. Secretary. I'm very interested in the 12-mile limit, because if you respect the 12-mile limit, then that's de facto sovereignty of agreed to tacitly to the Chinese. Now, have we or have we not operated within the 12-mile limit in recent years?
I believe the last time we conducted a freedom of navigation operation within 12 nautical miles of one of those features was 2012.
2012, 3 years ago.
I might add, Senator, if I may, that freedom of navigation operations are one tool in a larger toolbox that we're going to need to use in fixing this issue. And we're in the process of putting together that toolbox. And as we move forward, we're going to consider freedom of navigation operations along with a variety of other options to ensure that both the Chinese and the region understands that we can operate, and we do operate, anywhere we can.
We ought to, and it seems to me that we ought to do it, because you see those, those area that has now been filled in. Since the last time we operated within the 12-mile limit, that number of acres has been dramatically increased, and we have watched it and really, well, the best sign of respecting freedom of the seas is not to de facto recognize a 12-mile limit, and the best way you can make sure that that is not recognized is to sail your ships in international waters, which it clearly is. These are artificial islands, and pass right on by. And that then puts the lie to the Admiral who said the South China Sea, as the name indicated, it belongs to China. It does not belong to China. It belongs to the international waterways. If people are allowed to fill in islands, and so therefore then they're subject to a 12-mile limit. The best way to prove that they're not is to go ahead and go in it. And we haven't done that since 2012. I don't find that acceptable, Mr. Secretary. With all the other tools you have in the toolbox, the most visible assertion of freedom of the seas is to peacefully sail inside the 12-mile limit of artificial islands, which in version of international law is not allowed to be sovereign territory of any nation.
Well, I agree with you, Mr. Chairman, that the South China Sea doesn't belong to China. We have, in recent years, conducted freedom of navigation operations in the vicinity of those features, and doing so again is one of the options, one of the array of options we're considering
Well,
for the
it's
future.
an option that hasn't been exercised in 3 years. Admiral Harris, what do you feel about it?
Sir, I agree that the South China Sea is no more China's than the Gulf of Mexico is Mexico's. I think that we must exercise our freedom of navigation throughout the region, and part of my responsibilities as the Pacific Command Commander is to give options to the President and to the Secretary, and those options are being considered, and we'll execute as directed by the President and the Secretary.
I've gone over my time, but I just very quickly, Mr. Secretary, with respect to China, do you agree with D&I Clapper's comments that the United States has no effective policy to deter China in cyberspace? Last week, he testified before the House Intelligence Committee. The United States lacked, quote, both the substance and the mindset of deterrence in cyberspace.
I would refer to what the President said last Friday when he stated that we can have a competition in cyberspace with China or with other countries, but we'll win. And what we are seeking is understandings with other...
Are we winning now?
I agree with General Clapper that deterring actions in cyberspace is very difficult.
Are we winning now?
I think everybody knows that we have the capability to
You know, Mr. Secretary, we've known each other a long time. I mean, are we winning now, in your view?
I think it's too early to tell, Mr. Chairman, but
Okay.
we're doing our best.
Thank you, Senator Reid.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And just to clarify the type of operations, have we conducted flyovers of these artificial facilities recently? When's the most recent flyover?
I defer to the Admiral on that question, sir.
Senator Reid, we have not conducted a direct flyover, overflight of any of the reclaimed lands, the territories that China has reclaimed recently.
So that is another option that you have, but you have not exercised that option.
You're correct, sir. We have a lot of options that are on the table.
Mr. Secretary, just stepping back a bit, one of the things that's happening in China now is extraordinary economic volatility, growth rates that are being challenged, which, if you have an insight, if you don't, then let me know. But this economic, and it may be long-term, it may be just something that's a cyclic, but is it encouraging them or discouraging them when it comes to these policies as I see? Your insight. Is it something that, you know, they felt several years ago that they had sort of turned the corner, that their economic power was so great that they could begin to move forward? Are any of those questions being raised internally now in China about their capacity? Or the alternative would be, are they going to double down because they've got economic problems at home, and therefore we can expect them to be even more provocative? Any insights?
Those are all extremely relevant questions, Senator. I'm not an economist and I'm not an expert on the Chinese economy, but I think that to the extent that the Communist Party relies on economic performance for its legitimacy, then I would suspect it's very concerned about recent overall economic performance. And I think we have to be alert to the possibility that the Chinese might use a problem in foreign affairs to distract people's attention from their domestic problems. On the subject of Chinese assertiveness, I think it's only natural for a country like China that is growing in wealth to turn to military modernization. I think Chinese military modernization and the growth of their defense budget has been extremely robust. We remain very concerned about the pace of growth in the Chinese defense budget and the lack of transparency and the overall effect that has on regional stability. And of course, as they modernize, one would expect them to become more assertive abroad, and that's just what we're doing, and that's something that we are addressing with this regional security strategy.
Admiral Harris, as I indicated in my opening remarks, there's concern about North Korea. In fact, I recall when we met in Singapore, you expressed significant concern. Can you just briefly give us your latest update about the North Korean activities? And also, I might add, since China shares a border with North Korea, are they at all being helpful, or do they recognize the threats that are posed by the regime in North Korea?
Senator, I believe that, as I've said before, that North Korea is the greatest threat that I face in the Pacific as a Pacific Command commander. I think that you have a leader in North Korea who has nuclear weapons and is seeking the means to miniaturize them and deliver them intercontinentally, and that causes me great concern. He's got 20,000 to 30,000 artillery pieces within a range of Seoul, amounting to several 100,000 rockets that place 28,000 American troops plus their families and the 700,000 American citizens who live on the Korean Peninsula in danger. So I view the threat from North Korea very seriously. I think that China's influence on North Korea is waning, or China doesn't have the influence on North Korea that it had in the past. So that is also an area of concern. There are many areas globally where we cooperate with China, and one of the areas in the past where we have received cooperation from China has been to mitigate the behavior in North Korea. We're not seeing that today, and that causes me great concern.
So one of the initiatives that we have with the Chinese is not just checking their disregard for international law of the sea, et cetera, but also re-engaging them to work together to face a very significant threat in North Korea. Is that accurate?
You're correct, sir. I mean, I've been very critical of Chinese behavior in the last 2 years, but I've also been, I've acknowledged where China has been helpful, and they've been helpful in removal of chemical weapons from Syria, and the counter-piracy efforts off the Horn of Africa, and the search for the Malaysian airliner MH370 off of Australia, and the support to the Philippines in the November 2013 typhoon that hit that country. So we should acknowledge those good things that China has done. At the same time, be critical and hold them account for those negative things they do.
Mr. Secretary, you have a quick comment.
Sir, if I may add to that, we exchange views with the Chinese on North Korea regularly. I did so in Beijing with my Chinese PLA counterparts just 10 days ago. The Chinese reiterated to me, as they have in the past, that their influence with North Korea is limited, particularly under the new regime. During the recent crisis related to the North Korean provocation on August 4, it wasn't clear to us that the Chinese had a lot of contact with the North Koreans or were able to significantly influence them.
Are they worried about that?
I think they are.
Thank you.
Senator Inhofe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let's talk about assets current and future. The Admiral Harris, one of the DoD lines of effort in our Asia-Pacific maritime security strategy, it says by 2020, 60% of naval and overseas air assets will be home ported in the Pacific region, okay? Now, when you say that, right now, in terms of our vessels, we have a fleet of 270, it should be 305, and you're projecting now saying 60% of what it will be in 2020. What kind of figures are you looking at in calculating that?
I've got a meeting.
Senator, the numbers you cited are correct. We have in the 270 range now. In by 2020, we should have a little over 300 ships, around 310. So we're talking 60% of actually a larger number, not a small.
A larger number that we would anticipate would be available by that time, and I hope you're right. But now, the source of those have to come up from other commands. Is that correct?
I got a meeting at 11.
If you increase to 60%, you'll have to be taking some assets away from EUCOM, CENTCOM, and other commands, correct?
Right, but those commands don't have assigned naval forces. Only the Pacific has forces that are assigned to the Pacific Command.
But they are using those assets.
That is correct.
And
That
are
is
you
correct.
coordinating with those when you make these assumptions and predictions as to what we should be doing in 2020 with the combatant commanders?
Oh, yes, sir. As I've said before, the world gets a vote. And so, the activities in Russia or other places could draw assets away.
Yeah, I understand that.
But 60% of the Navy's combatants will be based in the Pacific writ large by 2020.
Yeah. Admiral Harris, you've been around for quite a while, and you might remember what I refer to, sometimes not too affectionately, the Battle of Vieques. And at that time, that was during the Clinton-Gore administration, and at that time we had the only place that we could identify in the world for integrated training was the island of Vieques. And you might remember that we had this big fight, and right here in this room, I'll never forget it, where it's primarily driven by Vice President Gore to do away with the live range down there. Now, it's interestingly enough, those things that we said were going to happen to Rosie Roads and other assets there became a reality, and now they're begging us to come back. But nonetheless, the point I'm making is I went all over the world looking for areas where you can have this kind of integrated training. Where are we today in terms of our areas that have available to us for the type of training that you have to have?
Senator, in the Pacific, we have integrated ranges. In Hawaii, the Pacific Missile Range facility is one of the finest in the world. In Guam, and we're building new range facilities in the Guam operating area. But these ranges, as you said, are vital to our ability to train. And we're working with the countries involved, the states involved, and environmentalists that are involved in order to do this in the right way to satisfy all of the constituencies that are there and get our training done.
Okay, now in terms, you talked to Secretary Shear a little bit about some of our exercises that we have out there. RIMPAC is one of the big ones. 22 nations were involved in that. 49 surface ships, 6 submarines, 200 aircraft, some 25,000 personnel. Now, it was a great exercise, I understand that. Do we have the assets now to continue that type of exercise for the near future?
I believe we do, sir. And you're absolutely right that RIMPAC is a vital and important exercise not only for the U.S. but for the region, and we believe we have the resources we need to continue conducting that.
Well, I would hope that would be the case. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Shaheen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you both for testifying today. Admiral Harris, in your testimony, you point out that we insist that all maritime claims be derived from naturally formed land features in accordance with international laws reflected in the Law of the Sea Convention. Are we at any kind of a disadvantage because we haven't been a signatory to the Law of the Sea Convention?
Senator, I believe we are at a disadvantage because we don't have the moral high ground that other countries who are signatories, including China and Russia, have. So when China makes these outrageous claims in the South China Sea, and the Philippines, for example, challenges one of those claims in an international tribunal for law of the sea, and we support the Philippines' right to make that claim. At the same time, we're not a signatory, so that looks kind of strange. When Russia makes these outrageous claims in the Arctic region, in the Arctic Circle, and they tell us you have no standing on which to complain because you're not a signatory to the law of the sea, it puts us at a disadvantage.
Thank you. I certainly agree. I would hope that we would reevaluate our position and become a signatory with most of the rest of the world of the Law of the Sea Convention. Senator Reid raised the threat from North Korea. Secretary Shear, earlier this year, Admiral Gortney assessed that North Korea has the ability to launch an intercontinental ballistic missile that could be capable of hitting the U.S. from a mobile launcher. And we saw right before Secretary Carter visited Japan that they launched 2 short-range missiles. You talked about China and their waning influence with North Korea. Are there other measures that we ought to be taking with respect to North Korea? And should we have any sense of optimism about the recent overtures between North and South Korea where they seem to be talking a little more?
Thank you, Senator. That's an important question. We certainly support the efforts by the North and South to conduct senior-level dialogue. As with past efforts to conduct such dialogue, I think we need to be very cautious in how we view the prospects. But I view this current effort to be a direct outcome of the very robust position the ROK took in negotiations with the North at Panmunjom to resolve the issue precipitated by the North Korean provocation of August 4th. So I think it's very important that they've embarked on this effort, but we're just going to have to be very cautious. We support the ROK very strongly in this effort. More generally, our approach to North Korea is a combination of diplomacy and pressure. And as we go forward toward a possible North Korean missile launch, for example, we're going to be engaging our 6-party partners, and we're going to be considering what extra pressure we might put on North Korea should they decide to conduct that missile launch.
And I assume you don't want to talk publicly about what those additional pressures might be?
Well, we put a great many sanctions on North Korea, and further sanctions would be one possibility.
Thank you. Did you want to add anything, Admiral Harris?
Sure, Senator. I'll just add that I think the key is to be ready for all outcomes regarding North Korea from a position of strength. So I tend to be a pessimist when it comes to dealing with the capabilities of other countries. And so, again, it's best to be cognizant of all outcomes. And that's why things like ballistic missile defense are important, and we strengthen South Korea's ability in their BMD systems, and that is why I personally believe the THAAD on the peninsula is important as well, the Terminal High Altitude Missile Defense System.
Thank you. There's been a lot of discussion today, and earlier this year, Admiral Roughead, for example, noted that for the last decade, the U.S. has flown with impunity in Iraq and Afghanistan with no threat to anti-air weapons. He noted that our capabilities to do that will be threatened in the future as China has been able to field more capabilities. I guess I would first say, do you agree with that assessment? And then can you talk about what that new technology that China's developing and our ability to stay ahead is how that's going to be affected by sequestration. And I don't know which one of you wants to.
Okay, well, I'll start. China feels a very modern military, and they're growing in capability and capacity. We have a technological edge over them in almost every way, if not in every way. I'm confident in our ability to take the fight to China if it should come to that, and I certainly hope it doesn't. That said, we have to maintain that technological edge, and they are growing in their capability, in their technological capability, and that's of concern to me. I think we need to have fifth-generation fighters, for example, and we need to have a lot of them. That's Joint Strike Fighter, the F-35. And we need to continue to upgrade our fourth-generation fighters with fifth-generation capabilities because we have a lot of them, and I think that's important.
And Secretary Shear, I know I'm out of time, but you just may want to add what you think if cuts go back into effect for fiscal year 2016, what that would do to our ability to continue to have that technology.
Well, we're certainly concerned about the possible effects cuts may have both on current operations and our ability to develop the new technologies we need to maintain our military dominance in the region. And that's something that Secretary Carter is extremely interested in. Our Defense Innovation Initiative is designed to develop those capabilities we're going to need to counter area access and denial strategies and to maintain our superiority in the region. So we're committed not only to deploying our best capabilities to the region now, we're committed to devising the technologies we need to maintain our edge.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here today. We appreciate it very much. It was reported earlier this week that Japan will be providing $832 million in infrastructure aid to Vietnam and another $1.7 million worth of ships and equipment to them as well to help counter the rising of China. So I am very glad that our allies are improving their relationships to counter the Chinese aggression. Both Japan and Vietnam are key allies for us here in the United States, and developing that strong security and economic partnership with both Japan and Vietnam will allow us to better check China's aggression in that region. So for both of you, if you would please, how will this new agreement between Vietnam and Japan improve that security situation in that region? And also, under the Southeast Asia Maritime Security Initiative, what specifically is the Department doing to build partner capacity and capability in Vietnam and in other Southeast Asian nations?
Thank you, Senator. That's a great point. We strongly support Japanese efforts to coordinate with us in building partner capacity, particularly with Vietnam, countries like Vietnam, the Philippines, and probably in the future Malaysia. This is something that I worked on with my Japanese colleagues while I was ambassador in Hanoi, and I'm delighted to see that it has come to fruition for the Japanese side. And we're interested in taking similar actions, as you state, in our Maritime Security Initiative, which is in the FY16 NDAA. That's a 5-year, $425 million program, and we greatly appreciate the committee's support on this effort. Under that initiative, we hope to not only improve physical capacity of our partners in say, providing, for example, Coast Guard vessels, but we want to improve their institutional capacity. We want to improve their sustainability, and that's something very important with the Philippines. We want to improve their professionalism. So this would be a very broad program designed to raise the level of, particularly of the maritime law enforcement capabilities of our partners in the region.
Senator, I was in Vietnam in my previous assignment as the Pacific Fleet Commander, and I just returned from the Philippines a few weeks ago. I welcome Japan's overtures and their efforts to improve the capacity of both countries, of Vietnam and the Philippines. I think Vietnam presents an ideal opportunity for us as we work more closely with them. I think that that is another indication of the response of the region to China's bad behavior in the South China Sea, where countries that previously were at odds with us, or actually leaders of the non-aligned movement, are now coming to us for assistance and are opening themselves up to us. And that's one of the costs that China has to bear for its bad behavior in the South China Sea region.
Very good, thank you. And you have mentioned, both of you, the Philippines several times, and they have proven to be a great ally, whether it's the global war on terror, hurricane humanitarian relief efforts, and so forth. Are there specific steps that we can take or should be taking with the Philippines at this time to further develop those relationships?
You're right, Senator. More can be done. When the President was in Manila last year, he stated publicly that our commitment under the Mutual Defense Treaty to the Philippines is ironclad, that no one should have any doubt about the extent of our commitment under that treaty. And we are working with the Philippines, both in terms of, we are already working with the Philippines, even before we implement the Maritime Security Initiative, to increase their capabilities, to train and operate with them, and to overall strengthen their ability to resist Chinese coercion.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen, very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, gentlemen. Admiral Harris, thank you so much for the briefing you gave me last month in Honolulu. You mentioned, Admiral, that North Korea is the greatest threat that you face as Pacific Commander, and you noted that China's influence in North Korea is waning. Is there another country, i.e. Russia, that's stepping into this vacuum in relationships with North Korea?
Senator, I don't know of any Russian overtures with North Korea other than what I've read in open sources, where they have always had some relationships with them because of their histories. But I believe that today the greatest threat I face is North Korea. But North Korea today, in my opinion, is not an existential threat to the United States as Russia is. In the Pacific, as you know well, Russia has a long coastline. They have at least 2 major naval bases, including one for their ballistic missile submarines, 2 major air bases, and then a host of smaller operating bases in the Pacific. So these are things that I worry about as I look at the panoply of threats that the United States faces in the Pacific.
And Secretary Shear, we read recently that the Russians have recently approved significant infrastructure projects in what the Japanese call the Northern Territories. And there have been numerous visits to these remote locations by Russian leaders. So they are becoming active in that part of the world, not to mention in the Arctic. And I do share the concern that Admiral Harris raised, that we are at a disadvantage by not being signatories to the Law of the Sea. Would you share that assessment?
I agree with you, Senator, on the importance of ratification of the Law of the Sea. I agree with the Admiral on his assessment of Russian activities in the Asia-Pacific, and let me stress that our maritime strategy is designed to encompass Russia as well as China, as well as other challenges in the region.
What do you make of Russia's activities in the Northern Territories? Is this for domestic consumption, or does it have further reaching consequences?
Well, I confess, Senator, that I'm not familiar with all the details on the kinds of infrastructure that Russia is building in the Northern Territories, but we support the Japanese claim to the Northern Territories, and we would be concerned if the Russians used this infrastructure to further militarize or to bolster their military strength in the region.
Admiral Harris, I was in Okinawa last month because, of course, part of the Indo-Asia-Pacific rebalance to this part of the world involves the movement of or closing of Futenma facility. And most recently, on Monday, Governor Onaga of Okinawa Prefecture proclaimed that he will proceed with canceling the landfill permit required for developing the alternative facility in Henoko. So for both of you, what does this proclamation mean for the government of Japan and the Futenma replacement facility project that we need to get on with?
Senator, we have a long-standing treaty, mutual security treaty with Japan, and our obligation in that treaty is to provide security for Japan. Japan's obligation, one of Japan's obligations under that treaty, is to provide us bases from which to operate and do that. Okinawa is critical to our ability to defend Japan and our posture in the Asia-Pacific region. It is a Japanese national effort and a decision whether to override or overcome Governor Onaga's objections to the Futenma replacement facility. And they are working on that, and I have confidence that they will achieve their national aims because that's their obligations under the treaty for us.
If I may add to that briefly, Senator, we greatly appreciate the support the government of Japan has given to the effort to find a replacement for the Futenma facility. We appreciate their effort to get construction going for the Futenma replacement facility, and we were glad this week when we were informed by the Japanese government that construction-related activities have begun at the Henoko site for the Futenma replacement facilities.
So while there may be delays as a result of the governor of Okinawa's actions, that you expect that the Japanese government will continue to proceed with the replacement facility?
I do, Senator, and I want to stress that as we move forward on construction of the Futenma replacement facility, we, of course, as we always do, we will continue to consider Okinawan sensitivities with regard to the general issue of our presence and our operations in Okinawa.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Admiral Harris and Ambassador Shear, for all you do. Thanks for being here to answer our questions. Admiral Harris, you said that we need to ratify the Law of the Sea Treaty in order to acquire some type of moral high ground, particularly relative to Russia and China. I'm having a hard time seeing why it is that a country that is like the United States, that has used its power, its blood, and its treasure to protect navigation all over the world for 200 years, has to, in order to gain some moral high ground, ratify this particular treaty. Can you help me understand that?
Sure, Senator. The lack of signing the treaty doesn't affect our ability to be the strongest nation on the earth. But the lack of signing that treaty puts us at a disadvantage in discussions with most of the other countries in the world that have signed the treaty in moral standing, if you will. So we lose nothing by signing off on the treaty, but we lose a lot by not signing it.
And what is the it that we lose? And part of what I'd ask in connection to that, you've got one of the claims is that it might help us solve the South China Sea territorial disputes. But all the nations in the South China Sea, including China, that have coastline along the South China Sea, are members of the treaty. They're all parties to the treaty. The Philippines has brought a lawsuit against China under the treaty, and China, as I understand it, has basically ignored it. So how does that mean that this fixes the problem if we suddenly ratify the treaty?
Well, I don't think it would suddenly fix the problem, but as you said, the Philippines has brought a case against China in The Hague, an International Tribunal for Law of the Sea, on two issues. One, on the veracity of the 9-dash line claim itself, And then the second issue is whether the tribunal has jurisdiction to even judge that case. And we have supported the Philippines' right to take the claim to the International Tribunal, and in fact, we've praised them for doing so. And yet, we're not a signatory to the treaty itself. And if you shift to the Arctic, if you look at the outrageous claims that Russia has made in the Arctic Ocean, they're making those claims under their interpretation of the Law of the Sea Convention. And when we criticize them for those claims, they say that we have no standing to do so. And, you know, I would submit that most of the rest of the world who also has signed off on the treaty would probably share that opinion, or at least part of it. On the other side, you know, we have agreed as a policy to follow the precepts in the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. So we have that for us, but we're not a signatory to it. And again, I would say that, in my opinion, we lose nothing by signing it, and we lose a lot of moral high groundedness, if you will, by not signing it.
But if we're following the precepts in the treaty, notwithstanding the fact that we haven't ratified it and we're therefore not formally a party to it, I struggle with how that changes the moral high ground, and particularly when I don't think there's any country on earth that has a greater claim to moral high ground, particularly when it comes to navigational issues, when it comes to naval issues, than the United States, which for 200 years has kept shipping lanes open and safe. Can you tell me what navigational rights, if any, does the Navy lack today that it would suddenly have if we were to ratify that treaty?
So the Navy would lack nothing, whether we ratify the treaty or not. The United States would gain standing by signing off on the treaty.
And that standing, how would that standing benefit us in a material way relative to our interests in that part of the world?
Well, in some cases, under the convention sets up a framework for ocean exploration, for example, and it says that without getting into some of the real particulars, you go out to 200 miles, and that's your continental, your exclusive economic zone, and then out beyond that is the open ocean zone, if you will. And there are companies today, American companies, that won't explore out in that region beyond the 200-mile exclusive economic zone because they're not sure whether any competing claim will have an effect on them or whether they will lose in this international tribunal or other places. So I think that we lose an economic opportunity by not signing off on the treaty because it places in jeopardy the legal question, not the military or the strength question, but it places in jeopardy the legal question of what happens out beyond the exclusive economic zone for our companies that will gain an economic benefit from that.
Okay. I see my time's expired. I don't doubt the sincerity of your feelings on this. I would take issue with one aspect of what you said, though, that regardless of what benefits you might see from this, I wouldn't say that signing on to a treaty is without any cost on our part and without us giving up anything, particularly whereas here the treaty sets up a system that would, however incrementally, erode our national sovereignty. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Gentlemen, thank you for your public service. Admiral, where we have had the near misses in the 200-mile area that China is challenging us both in ships and in airplanes, we have successfully avoided those near misses where they have challenged us. You want to give us some insight into what your instructions are to our pilots and our ship captains with regard to those kind of incursions?
Sure, Senator. What I've told the component commanders at Pacific Fleet and Pacific Air Force is to tell their pilots and crews to do is to continue to insist on our right to operate in international airspace and in the maritime space. When challenged by Chinese fighter aircraft or our aircraft, or to maintain professional flight profiles, predictable flight profiles, and we have means to record that activity, and then we'll see what happens. So the last time we saw a very dangerous event was in the middle of last year, where the Chinese flew an aircraft over a P-8 and did a barrel roll over the top, which is a dangerous maneuver in acrobatic circles, let alone in an intercept regime in the open ocean. And we most recently have seen that again, but I'll give the system credit for that intervening period of time. We've seen very few dangerous activities by the Chinese following that August 2014 incident. And I think that's a tribute to the mill-to-mill relationship and the political relationship where we have worked with the Chinese to come to an agreement on the maritime and in the airspaces for confidence-building measures.
Well, that's good news. Now, is it going to be all the more strained given the 200-mile out from China area? But now, when you look at that map where they're filling in all of those islands, and now they're claiming almost that entire ocean as theirs, are we going to see more and more of these incidents well beyond their 200-mile limit?
Certainly the potential exists for more incidents. If they finish building the airfields, of which there's one there on Fiery Cross Reef on the side, and up to 2 additional airfields of 10,000-foot length, then that gives me great concern in the South China Sea. You know, if you look at National Airport, for example, a National Airport is only 6,700 feet long, capable of landing any airplane, any commercial airplane that we have. And China is building 3 runways of 10,000-foot length, which is only 1,000 foot shorter than it would be required for the land of space shuttle. So I think that that gives me great concern militarily. And they're also building deep water port facilities there, which could put their deep water ships, their combatant ships there, which gives them an extra capability. And if you look at all of these facilities, and you can imagine a network of missile sites, runways for their 5th-generation fighters, and surveillance sites, and all of that, it creates a mechanism by which China would have de facto control over the South China Sea in any scenario short of war. Now, these are obviously easy targets in war. They would be what we call in military grapes, if you will. But short of that, they pose the militarization of these features pose a threat, and certainly they pose a threat. It poses a threat, rather, against all other countries in the region.
And speaking of those countries, to what degree are they vigorously stepping up with us to object to that kind of stuff?
Well, I think they're stepping up to the limits of their capabilities. And so if you look at the Philippines, for example, they're doing it in probably the best way. I mean, they're taking it to an international tribunal for adjudication. Now, whether, I don't know how the tribunal is going to act or decide. And if they decide in the Philippines' favor, as Senator Lee said, I don't know if China is going to follow that. But it puts China in a quandary if the International Tribunal rules against China, and China is a signatory to UNCLOS. So it gives the Philippines at least a moral high ground to make a claim. The other countries are doing what they can also. You know, Chinese behavior in the South China Sea has enabled us to have a closer relationship with Vietnam, Indonesia, and Malaysia. And I think that's very important. And those are costs that China is having to expend because of its bad behavior in the South China Sea.
Sir, if I could just reinforce what the Admiral just said. I, of course, share the Admiral's concern about the military implications of Chinese activities in the South China Sea. And that's why we are calling for a halt to further reclamation, a halt to construction, and a halt to further militarization of those facilities. The Chinese have not yet placed advanced weaponry on those features, and we're going to do everything we can to ensure that they don't. This is going to be a long-term effort. There are no silver bullets in this effort, but we're certainly complicating Chinese calculations already. And if you pull back for a minute and look at our goals, which include safeguarding freedom of navigation and deterring coercion, I think we've made some gains in both these areas. We continue to operate freely in the South China Sea, and we continue to prevent the Chinese from coercing our allies and partners into concluding deals that are not in their interests and not in our interests with regard to claims in the South China Sea.
That we freely operate in the South China Sea is a success. It's a pretty low bar, Mr. Secretary. Senator Sullivan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, gentlemen, for your service. I think it's clear just from the testimony here and previous statements that we have a confused policy within the South China Sea with regard to the built-up islands, and as you know, confusion can cause miscalculations. Let me just give you kind of one example of it. We were in Singapore for the Shangri-La Dialogue, the Secretary and the Secretary Reid, Senator Reid, Senator Ernst, the chairman. Secretary Carter, I thought, had a forceful statement at the time. You know it, you've seen it, we will fly, sail, anywhere. And then he stated, quote, "After all, turning an underwater rock into an airfield simply does not afford the rights of sovereignty or permit restrictions on international air or maritime transit." Pretty strong statement in a very critical place. Admiral Harris, you later stated, I think at the Aspen Forum, it is U.S. policy to afford a 12-mile limit around all the islands that are in the South China Sea, and it's been long-standing policy, not because they're occupied or built up by China, but just in general. So to me, that's a dramatic contrast. You have the PACOM commander saying something very different than the Secretary of Defense. That's confusion. We obviously have three policy-making centers going on here, the uniformed military, DOD civilians led by Secretary Carter, and the White House. In your professional opinion, Admiral Harris, what should we sail or fly inside the 12-mile area with regard to those islands, as Secretary Carter stated we should?
Senator, I believe that there's only one policy-making center, and not three, and that runs through the Secretary of Defense.
No, but I'm asking your professional opinion as a military.
And I believe that we should be allowed to exercise freedom of navigation and flight, maritime and flight, in the South China Sea against those islands that are not islands.
Inside the 12-mile limit.
Depending on the feature. You know, if...
What about that one?
That one, yes. We should be able to fly.
Have you or Secretary Carter asked the White House for permission to do that?
Senator, I have given policy options, military options, to the Secretary, and I would leave it to the Secretary or the Ambassador to address whether.
What has the White House said when you've asked permission to go within the 12-mile zone of a feature like that?
Senator, PACOM, along with the Department of Defense, are options-generating institutions, and the Secretary is particularly interested in options with regard to the South China Sea in general.
But I mean, I just asked a simple question. What did the White House say if you asked for permission to go inside the 12-mile limit? What did the White House say?
Conducting that kind of freedom of operation, freedom of navigation operation is one of the operations we're considering.
You're not answering my question. Did you ask the White House for permission to do this, and what did they tell you?
Sir, I'm not able to discuss current policy deliberations, but I can assure you that that's one of the operations that the administration is considering.
Okay, I appreciate you just answering the question.
Again, I'm just not able to go into the details.
So I think when the Secretary of Defense makes a definitive statement like that at a very important meeting of defense ministers in Asia, and then we don't follow up on it, it undermines our credibility. And that's something that we can't afford anymore. Our credibility is undermined everywhere in the world, and we do it here. It would be good if you could give me an answer to that question. You're obviously dodging it right now.
Sir, I'd be delighted to give you the best possible answer, and I think that is that I'm just not able to.
Let me just, I want to turn real quick to the Alaska incident that the chairman mentioned. I thought our reaction was almost, it was immediate, it was muted, it was almost apologetic relative to the way the Chinese respond when we come within 12 miles of one of their islands. You know, the President of the United States was in Alaska at the time. Do you believe that that was a coincidence that he was there, or do you believe that was a provocation? That the Chinese were aggressively off the coast of Alaska when the President of the United States was visiting?
Well, I'm not in a position to describe Chinese thinking on this, but...
What's our analysis, either of you, from your perspective?
Senator, they were conducting an exercise with the Russians in the northern Pacific, and I believe, my opinion, is they went into the Bering Sea to demonstrate their capability to operate that far north, and then they decided to go home.
Do you think it was time to coincide with the President of the
No,
United States?
I don't think it was, my opinion. I mean, I'm not going into any intelligence matters at all. They were having an exercise with the Russians, and I think that exercise was long planned, and then they decided to go into the Bering Sea. They were near there anyway, and then they turned south and headed home. I think it was coincidental, but I don't know that for a fact. And their transit south was an expeditious transit, innocent passage through to Aleutian Islands. That's their right to do under international law, as is our right to do in international law wherever we operate.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I thought it was more of a provocation and a demonstration of their interest in the Arctic. I'm not sure that this White House would recognize a provocation if it was slapped in the face, and we need to be aware of that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Sullivan. On behalf of the chairman, Senator Tillis.
Thank you, Senator Reid. Admiral Harris, thank you for the time that I was allowed to spend with you out in headquarters. We've got a very thorough brief, so I'm not going to cover that ground, but I appreciate it, and I know that in your public statement or your opening statement and in the conversation you've covered some of it. But I do want to get back and maybe build on questions that Senator Inhofe asked, and it had to do with the rebalancing, where we're going out and saying that we're putting more assets as a percentage of the base into your area of command. But we continue to miss the point that the base is shrinking. So part of what I'm trying to do is get my head around a number of different variables that really let us measure the gap between China and the United States and our allies. You said when we were out there in the briefing that quantity has a quality of its own. And so that right now we still continue to enjoy an advantage over the Chinese in terms of the assets we have in the region. When you start trending out to 2020 and beyond, and you take into account that they may have more ships, but their survivability doesn't compare to our own, and the technology on board doesn't compare to our own, at what point does the gap, if you were projecting, assuming sequestration was going to be in place, I hope that that's not true, but let's assume that we are, and the current plans for downsizing, at what point do we really reach a point to where it's a fair fight or we may be at a disadvantage? I don't want us to be in a fair fight, incidentally, so I want to know when it is, and then at what point does it erode to where we have a quantitative or qualitative disadvantage in the against China?
Yes, sir. I'm all for having unfair fights, and I think that those fights ought to be unfair in our advantage. I believe that that if we are continue to be sequestered through 2021, 2022, and China continues the pace of its building, that their quantitative advantage will be significant in the mid-2020s. I think that
to overcome our qualitative advantage?
Yeah, I think we will always have a qualitative advantage if we maintain the trajectory we're on. We have better trained people, better equipment, and all of that. But as you said, that a quantity has a quality all its own. And their weapon systems and their ships and airplanes bristle with weapons, and they probably view the loss of those ships in a much different way than we would view the loss of our ships and the sailors on them. So I'm worried about the pace of the Chinese buildup against the likelihood or the possibility that we're going to be we will continue to be sequestered. And I think that will pose a very real problem for us in the 2020s. And I think that we should look at that very closely, sir.
Has there been work done to try and put that on paper? May not be appropriate for an open setting, but to take into account our own unilateral capabilities in the regions, the added capacity of our allies. It's another advantage that we share there. We have allies, they don't really. But has there been anything at that level that I can put my hands on to really understand that, and then the trending out into the mid-20s? And Ambassador?
I think with regard to China, we put out the annual China Military Power Report, and I think that's a good measure of where the Chinese have been and where they're going with regard to military modernization and their capabilities.
Does that include a matchup against our projected capabilities, assuming sequestration, the other policies that are the givens right now?
It does not, sir.
Yeah. That's more or less what I'm talking about, to try and figure out where the gap is and where we really have to sound the alarm that we're letting the margin of advantage erode.
Yeah. Senator, the U.S.-China Commission, a body that's chartered by Congress, puts out an annual report that's exceptional in reading about China's capabilities. So I would commend that to you as well.
Thank you.
As far as the allies go, we have 5 treaty allies in the Pacific of varying degrees of capability, but whether they would be with us in every fight is a matter for them to decide and the fight at hand. And so, while I count the delta in numbers between us and China, I try not to count the quantity of assets our allies have, because depending on the situation at hand and their own national decisions, we might have to fight alone.
Thank you. And Senator Reid, if I may, the only thing, I don't think it came up in the discussion, but either for the Ambassador or for Admiral Harris, to what extent do you believe that the trade agreement, in this particular case TPP and the partners there, is another key part of our military strategy down in the South China Sea and the Pacific?
It's definitely a key part of our strategy, Senator. The TPP is not just economically beneficial, but it's strategic. And I think our partners understand that. The Vietnamese certainly understand it. When I was ambassador in Vietnam through last year, the Vietnamese had an acute understanding of the strategic importance of TPP, and it will be one of the ways in which we further knit together Southeast Asian integration and ASEAN strength. Not all ASEAN members are TPP partners, but TPP will certainly raise economic activity through the region, and countries like Vietnam are among those TPP partners which will benefit the most.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Tillis. I've been informed that some of my colleagues are returning from the vote on the floor and would like to ask questions, and that gives me the opportunity to ask a few questions so they return. So, Admiral Harris, we have spent a great deal of time talking about the South China Sea, but India and Australia are actually conducting joint maritime exercises in the Indian Ocean, actually anti-submarine exercises, and presumably that's because of the presence more and more often of Chinese submarines in that area. So can you describe these operations? Does this represent another challenge to the existing security arrangements in the area?
Senator, we're seeing Chinese submarine deployments extend further and further, almost with every deployment. It has become routine for Chinese submarines to travel to the Horn of Africa region, the North Arabian Sea, in conjunction with their counter-piracy task force operations We're seeing their ballistic missile submarines travel in the Pacific at further ranges, and of course, all of those is of concern. With regard to India and Australia, Australia is one of our principal allies in the Indo-Asia Pacific region, certainly an ally with tremendous capability. India presents a terrific opportunity for us, and one of the PACOM lines of effort is an improved mill-to-mill relationship with India. I'm excited by the opportunities that we have with India, by the work that the Secretary of Defense has done and Assistant Secretary of Defense Kendall has done with regard to the DTTI, the Defense Initiative with India, to help them build up their military and help them build an aircraft carrier and aircraft carrier capability. So India presents a wonderful opportunity for us. They share our values and our norms, and one of my objectives is to improve that relationship with India.
This increased activity by Chinese submarines, both attack submarines and ballistic submarines, is that further stressing your submarine fleet in the Pacific, those ships that are available to you?
It is. It is clearly stressing it, and the new Russian submarines that are moving into the Pacific Fleet area, their Pacific Fleet area, also places a stress on limited assets that we have.
So we have to continue, obviously, to keep a robust submarine fleet, both attack submarines and ballistic missile submarines.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Sir, I'd like to,
Please,
if I may, I'd like to
Secretary.
add a little more on India. When President Obama was in India for meetings with Prime Minister Modi in January, they issued a joint strategic vision on the Indian Ocean and East Asia. And we're in the process of devising ways of implementing that joint strategic vision. I was in India through last Saturday for discussions with my counterparts on how to implement that vision. We already have a robust program as the robust bilateral cooperation with the Indians. The Admiral mentioned DTTI. We also have a carrier cooperation working group that has begun to meet. I think cooperation in carrier technology and design, as well as in carrier operations, offers us a terrific opportunity to improve our ability to work with the Indians. And we'll be looking at other ways of strengthening our partnership. We conduct an annual exercise, the Malabar exercise, in which we and the Indians have just decided to include the Japanese. So that'll be every year now. That'll be a strong trilateral exercise in the region. And we're looking at other ways, particularly in maritime domain awareness, to strengthen what we do with the Indians, because we have very strong common interests.
Well, thank you, Mr. Secretary. Just a further point, Senator Ayotte, if she is ready, I'd be happy to yield.
That'd be great. If you want to finish.
No. Thank you. At this point, let me, on behalf of Chairman McCain, recognize Senator Ayotte. Thank you, gentlemen.
I want to thank the ranking member. Appreciate it. And first of all, Admiral Harris, I want to thank you for following through and visiting the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard. I know that everyone at the shipyard was very appreciative of your taking the time to see the incredible work being done there on our attack submarine fleet. So thank you. We're grateful. I wanted to ask and follow up on some of the questions that you have been asked, Admiral. And just so I think I understand from the testimony you've given, but I want to make sure that we're clear, because I know that you've been asked about the Asia-Pacific maritime security strategy, that China's artificial islands could at most generate a 500-meter safety zone, and that, of course, the Department of Defense had released a statement saying that these features under international law don't generate any maritime zones because you believe that they're not legitimate. What this means in practice is that the Navy actually can, as you know, sail its ships within 500 meters of these new land masses without violating the law because they're not legitimately there under international law. So I wanted to understand, is the Navy sailing within 500 meters of China's artificial islands? at this point?
No, ma'am.
Okay. And has the Pacific Command at least sent Navy surface ships within 12 miles of China's artificial islands?
We have not.
Okay. So I guess the big question I think many of us are trying to get at this point, and I don't know, Admiral Harris, whether you or Ambassador Shear are the appropriate person to answer the question, but why not? Saying we are going to sail and fly where international law permits and then not doing it, I'm concerned leaves China with the impression that we're, again, going to say something but not follow through on our actions, and we are going to invite more aggression by the Chinese with the activities they've been taking that are in violation of international law in building these artificial islands. So I wanted to get your answer to that.
Let me elaborate a little on what the Admiral said. In recent years, we have challenged every category of Chinese claim in the South China Sea, as recently as this year. And we will continue to conduct freedom of navigation operations in the South China Sea. But let me be clear on this point. Freedom of navigation operations are important for demonstrating our rights under international law, but freedom of navigation operation alone won't stop Chinese activities on these features. Preventing the Chinese from further militarizing those features is going to take a range of options, including freedom of navigation operations, and we're in the process of considering those options now.
Admiral, did you want to add to that?
I'll just add that PACOM presents options, military options, to the Secretary, and those options cover the full range of opportunities in the South China Sea, and we're ready to execute those options when directed.
So you're waiting for, obviously, the administration to make the call on that?
Well, I mean, a freedom of navigation operation itself, as Ambassador Shear said, is not a military-only device. You know, it has a military component, obviously, because the military executes it, but it has other elements to it which are derived by the Secretariat and the White House. So we're waiting for direction, and I'm comfortable and confident that the options that we presented are being considered equitably.
Well, as I look at this situation, though, I appreciate, obviously, Admiral, that PACOM, as a commander, you'd be waiting for direction from the White House. But as I look at it, the Chinese have to be looking at this situation saying, the United States has declared that under international law, this is not legitimate, and that we have the right to obviously put our vessels in these areas. And so, but the Navy has not sailed within, 12 nautical miles of the Chinese artificial islands at this point. And so I think they get it both ways. So they're saying, we're saying one thing, but we're certainly not willing to address where we have a free right to navigate. So I hope that we follow up with our actions and our words on this. Otherwise, I fear that the Chinese will continue their actions, because otherwise they think, hey, why not? And my time is up, but I'm going to submit for the record, Admiral Harris.
Senator, if you'd like to take some more time.
Oh, thank you. I
Quite
just had a
appropriate.
follow-up on a totally different topic. Thank you. I appreciate it. I wanted to ask both of you on a different topic, which is about our POW MIAs and our recovery efforts. And this is a very important issue. I know Senator McCain, Senator McCaskill have been very focused on this as well, and I've been appreciative of working with them. But obviously, the Department of Defense has reorganized its recovery efforts and stood up the new Defense POW MIA Accounting Agency, the DPAA, in January of 2015, just the beginning of this year. And one of the explicit purposes of this new organization is to effectively increase the number of missing service personnel accounted for from past conflicts. So I wanted to ask, of course, With your mission in PACOM, this is incredibly important because of our fallen heroes that were in the Asia-Pacific region, including, according to DoD, over 83,000 Americans are missing in action, 73,000 from World War II, 7,500 from Korean War. And we just had, in New Hampshire, we had someone who was able to welcome home the remains of his uncle. And this really moved me because we know how important it is to family members to have that kind of closure. And also 1,600 from Vietnam, including 42 from my state. So, Admiral Harris, I know this came up in your advanced policy questions. Can you give me an update on how DPAA is doing, what efforts we're taking, and if both of you could let me know your commitment as we look at this. China has a very important role here in helping us recover our fallen heroes. So could you help me on this?
Yes, ma'am. As you stated at the beginning, the Joint POW Accounting Command, JPAC, the chain of command was changed, and now it's DPAA, and the chain of command now, it no longer reports to PACOM. It reports directly to an agency under DoD. My responsibility as PACOM is to be in support of DPAA. And the people in Hawaii who actually work at the facility there, the DPAA facility now, they're the same people, and I think they're doing a great job. They just recovered a bunch of remains in one of the Pacific Island battles, including the remains of a Medal of Honor recipient. And PACOM's responsibility was to provide support for the airlift and all of that. And I think that's a tremendous effort by them. I acknowledge the importance of going after every POW MIA case that's extant. I think China, we need to continue to work with China and with North Korea and the other countries over which our fallen are from all the wars.
One thing that I wanted to also clarify, Ambassador Shear, is just, and I appreciate, Admiral Harris, your commitment to this. As I understand, we do have an agreement that was formalized with the Chinese, but at this point we've been somewhat stymied of getting information that they may have about Korean War POW camp records. And I understand that Mr. Lennington, who's the director of the DPAA, has or will be interacting with the Chinese government, and wanted to know what efforts the administration would be making in supporting his efforts to facilitate that communication, as Admiral Harris says, to be able to bring our soldiers home.
Ma'am, I strongly support the efforts of the DPPA to make the fullest possible accounting of our missing personnel. And as ambassador to Vietnam, I visited recovery sites, I participated in recovery ceremonies, and as assistant secretary, I hope to support the efforts of the DPPA just as strongly. I'm aware of Director Lennington's efforts in regard to China and more broadly, and I support those efforts in discussions with my counterparts.
Great. Thank you both for that commitment. I appreciate it. We do not want to ever forget and make sure that we can bring as much closure to our families and bring our soldiers home.
Thank you very much. Gentlemen, thank you for your testimony this morning. And on behalf of Chairman McCain, let me now adjourn the hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.